Right, it's middle of September, no, December 2022, and at long last I'm in the woods again, cutting next year's firewood, so that's 2023-24 winter's firewood. And yeah, things have been a bit held up this year. Some of the hazels, as you can see, and the oaks still have leaves on, which is a bit unusual. We had a drought during the summer, which slightly affected regrowth, but not too badly at all in the wood here. And then we had a warm, mild spell with lots of rain, and then for the last week and a bit there's been snow lying, which is just about gone. Had some very hard frosts for this part of the world. So yeah, been a bit delayed this year, but it doesn't really matter. Sapping these trees, despite the leaves being on, will be well down. Most of the nutrients, etc., will already be withdrawn into the trees and the root systems, the trunks and the root systems. And this is the bit I'm going to be cutting. Last year's cant was over there. Might go and have a look in a wee while. And that's the fallen oak that we did the little video on as to whether you should use it as firewood or whether you should use it for something better. And here you can see remains of the snow which came down the other day. Has lasted a rather unusually long time. All the ground in the open is still fairly hard. They would come up the bottom track in my two-wheel drive Ancient van and stick it there without getting bogged down or spinning the wheels or anything. And over here we can see an area which my neighbours cut probably 3 winters ago. And you can see the effect of the deer. So deer browsing, bit the deer weren't able to get at because of the laid lop and top. I'm going to use the lop and top as a dead hedge, as you can see over there, which is my last year's boundary. And all these are going to come over this way, so I enclose as much of this as possible. And what I shall do is, being as that's more or less south over there, you can probably see looking into the sun, is I'm going to make myself a little fixed point about here, and hopefully you can see most of the area I'm going to cut. You can see this big oak standard and a sweet chestnut standard. Hopefully, yeah, that's the next oak standard, which is in last year's cant, and the dead hedge will come along here and then go downhill. I'm hoping to enclose as much of these stools as I can, stop the deer from browsing them, get them to regrow, and I'll try and do some whatchamacallit, oh dear, time lapse. So I'll make myself a little fixed point to go on here, so the camera goes at the same height, same direction each time, and we'll see how the work goes on. Something I've not tried before. Anyway, it's too cold to stand around talking to you chaps, so I'm going to get cracking with it. Right then people, done the first tiny bit of clearing and sorted out in my own mind what the plan's going to be. That's me last year's dead hedge. So I'm going to drop these trees here, including the ones that lean that way, uphill, and then spin them 90 degrees, or certainly the ones that are over there, to make myself a dead hedge along here towards our fixed point. And then the ones on this edge are going to come this way and fill in here, and these ones down the bottom I'm going to take those out, and that'll make me dead hedge all the way down to the bottom fence and the dead hedge along the fence. And the idea is to basically fell onto the line of the dead hedge, which will be about here, so running straight through this gap towards that squirrel damaged beach in here you can see in the distance, and that'll anchor that corner. There'll be a 10x gateway in there, a Dorset gate, so that we can get into this area next year, unless my neighbours cut it. And then all the material will be taken downhill. Always extract downhill if at all possible. Uphill is working against gravity and makes you work harder. And stacked hard by last year's stack, and that'll have to be fenced with 10x so the deer can't get in beside it. And so I can take the 10x down when I've finished. And hopefully, over the coming couple of weeks, and certainly by the end of January is the plan, all else being equal, we'll end up with a nice bit of coppice. This bit here, the other side of my dead hedge line, which will be along here, will be outside of the fence. It'll be interesting to see how that goes on in terms of its regrowth with the deer browsing against the stuff inside the dead hedge, which will be, deer will be excluded. And I might actually recut some of these worst ones so they sprout again to the bottom, so next time it grows we'll end up with straights rather than wibbly wobbly horrors like this, which will detract from the value of the regenerated coppice sold standing. Even if this does grow from here and shoot up, that'll still be cut to waste, this section here. The stalls may survive, they may not. We'll find out. Right, let's see if I can figure out how to set this thing as what's it called, time lapse. Right, that's been at it just about an hour. Let's go and see damage done so far. Here's the line of my dead hedge. It needs to be 8 foot high at least. Nice and wide. Stool here. Cut everything off the stool. I certainly don't hold with the idea that you should leave these to single, because they basically take the vigour from the regeneration. All your regeneration needs to be as similar as possible. This one here is nearly finished, prep for felling. If the time lapse was working, you'll have seen that I don't finish each stool as I get to it. I take the individual stems as they come, because I don't like having to fight. For instance, this one would have been the second one I came to. It's leaning that way and it's going to get caught. So all the other ones around it will go first, because we're not taking this branch out. And here you can see we've been cutting the 2 chainsaw lengths. That gives us 5 foot on this little saw. And the stools are as low as possible without cutting into the roots. Oops. And then they're slanted very slightly to shed moisture, to limit the chances of rot. And over here see this is marked for cutting, sectioning. I'll get another 5 foot out of that, possibly another one out of that, a couple of 5 foots out of this one. You see, as you go, you sned tight so all these come off, so your finished product is as straight as possible. That makes the processing and the extracting from the wood a lot easier. But all this crazy stuff in the top is waste. On this sort of size stuff, yeah, that'll burn, do as starters when it's logged into lengths, but you get to a stage where there's so much side branches and it's so thin that it's dubious as to whether you ought to be doing it. So, a quick look the other way. The battery's getting low because it's cold. And we can also see a few more products aside from the firewood. Here's a bit that'll end up being a bean rod. It's a sun shoot. This one will be a stake for Dorset gate. Another one there. If they're a little bit fatter, you could cut them as 5'6". They'd be stakes for hedging. These will be bean rods unless I get an order, which is doubtful, for hedge laying material, when they'll be 10 foot plus, going away to as little as possible. These will be 10 foot bean rods, straight as possible, no J's on the end. That's got a J on it, so that'll be cut off and pointed. And I also sell 8 foots and 6 foots, and I sold them all last year, amazingly. Not an awful lot, there's about 30 bundles. But as they say, every little helps. Right, go and have a little breaky. Well, that's a couple of hours work and 1 tank of fuel, Husky 350, which sips fuel, which is good. Started the bottom dead hedge, cleared the area for the timber stack, started the line of the dead hedge down here, just where that branch scar is on that squirrel gnawed beech tree. So yeah, made a good start. I think it's fairly obvious to anyone comes up here what I'm about. And that's the meat of the material in there and in there. So give it 2 weeks and it should look pretty good. So I'm off to do some Saturday shopping and go away and have some lunch.